I used to think therapy was a room where the truth got a fair trial. Two chairs, one clock, a box of tissues, and some version of mercy. My wife called it an investment in our growth. I called it a budget line item and hoped I'd grow into the rest. I'm Ethan, 36, a systems admin for a mid-sized hospital network, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days reminding servers to breathe and restoring things people swear they didn't delete. My wife was, Lena, 33, a creative director for a boutique agency that sells authenticity to brands with polished wood conference tables. I label cables for fun. She renames decks 3 times until the title feels right. We used to joke that we were good at different kinds of honesty. Last fall, we hit that low-grade turbulence a lot of couples don't post about. Not screaming, not breaking plates, just a steady drip of mismatched expectations that made the house feel like it was leaning. I wanted a Saturday with no plans. She wanted 6 hours at a pumpkin patch for content and then dinner with people whose names I'd have to learn on the drive over. Money conversations took on a slick undertone. Sex turned into a scheduling app. I shrugged and told myself it happens. She said it needed a plan. I found someone, she said one night in November, like she'd located an organ donor. He specializes in attachment, relational trauma, all the good words. Zoom works with our schedules so we don't have to drive across town. This is us choosing each other. She slid her laptop toward me. A website, soft colors, leaves in a glass, a headshot of a man with kind eyes and a bracelet. Aaron Pierce, LMFT. The bio had that measured tone therapy sites use. I walk with couples toward their truest selves. It said he did supervision and wrote for journals with titles like The Narrative Couple. It didn't say anything about being Lena's ex-boyfriend. I didn't know to look for that line yet. I don't want to be the guy who says no to growth, I said. And it was true. If you spend your days undoing mistakes with backups, it's hard to argue with a process that promises restoration. Let's try it. We filled out intake forms she forwarded from his practice portal, medical history, family dynamics. What are your goals? Mine were boring and honest. Communicate better, fight fair, figure out how to have fun again. Hers were poetry, find safety in being seen, rebuild intimacy from the nervous system up. We scheduled 8 weeks every Thursday at 6. Session 1 felt like any well-run first meeting. He smiled into the camera like an old friend, said our names 3 times like he was stitching them to his shirt, and asked how we met. We told the short version, a winter party, a broken heater, a shared blanket that had us laughing at the same temperature. He nodded at our story like it was evidence. Then he asked each of us what we feared most. I said, losing you to a story that doesn't include me. Lena said, being controlled, and the air in our living room changed like someone had opened a freezer. He was gentle. He asked about patterns. He introduced pursuer-withdrawer. He said I sounded like a pursuer who chases with facts. He said Lena sounded like someone whose nervous system had learned to protect itself by disappearing. I felt seen and implicated at the same time, which I think is the branding. At the end, he asked if we'd consent to recordings for clinical notes and supervision. He said good clinicians review tape the way athletes review games. He said we could access them too, so nothing lived in a vault. He emailed a consent form and a Zoom link that landed in both our inboxes, Session 1, E&L. I signed because I sign things. Lena said, thank you for being brave, and I tried to accept the compliment like it fit me. Session 2, he had a phrase for everything I said that made me feel like both a case and a person. If I asked for a budget for chairs that didn't look like student loans, he called it financial prudence with control flavor. When Lena talked about how she panicked if I asked, where are you, he called it a trauma echo and told me to use curiosity over surveillance. I took notes because that's who I am. I wrote, ask what happened today, not where are you. It helped a little for about a week. When the recording link landed, we watched together. I wanted to see myself the way a stranger might, if I winced unkindly or leaned back too far. The video opened with his calm face. Okay, I'm going to hit record, he said. A cut, then the session. At the end, another cut. It seemed fine until Lena rewinded to a moment I remembered differently. She'd interrupted, I'd shut down. In the video, he paused me and said, let's give Lena space. She's in the red. I didn't remember that line being so sharp. It felt like the video had clipped a few seconds where she talked over me 3 times before I exhaled frustration. I shrugged it off. Editing is messy. Maybe he just trimmed chatter. Between sessions, he sent session summaries. They look like soap notes with an Instagram caption, presenting concern, Lena reports fear control, Ethan exhibits structured coping. Intervention, reframing of control as protective strategy. Homework, Ethan, practice 3 appreciations, Lena, name 3 moments of bodily safety. They were articulate and they made me sound like a spreadsheet with arms. I tried not to take it personally. By week 3, the axis had tilted. He opened by asking Lena how she'd been. He stayed there a while. When it was my turn, I got 7 minutes and a paraphrase. He asked if we could do brief individual check-ins at the start of each week to gauge nervous system states. 5 minutes each, he promised, then we come back together. I said okay because I didn't know the politics of no yet. The check-ins became a ritual where Lena would talk to him for 10 minutes while I muted and watched my face on my own screen like it was a witness. He asked her kind questions. He asked me if I could be okay if she needed more holding. After 3 weeks of more holding, the session started to resemble a panel with one panelist who kept getting commercial breaks. Small things began to itch. In week 4, he called Lena Lynn, and she laughed like an old sound had finally found the room. In week 5, he referenced the college dorm by name while telling an anecdote about how early attachment styles can show up sophomore year. It flitted right past. An example, a story, a therapist connecting dots. My brain, which keeps an index of all the jokes I've ever heard twice, wrote a sticky note, ask later. We had one good week in December where the work felt like work and not a verdict. He modeled a repair, he had us place hands on our own hearts, breathe, then try conflict again. I said, I feel small when plans arrive as a surprise. She said, I feel erased when the plan is no. We met a little in the middle. We ate leftovers on the couch like prisoners on furlough and watched a cooking show where no one yelled. Then came the week he used the word coercive. Not as an accusation, as a possibility. We were talking about passwords, about who pays which bill, about how I like a shared calendar. He tilted his head and said, I'm curious how we can ensure Lena's autonomy isn't curtailed by structures that feel like surveillance. Sometimes the line between prudence and coercive control is about the nervous system, not intent. He said it like a hypothesis. Lena latched onto it like a rope. By the end of the hour, I was apologizing for inviting her to a budgeting app 2 years ago and for asking to be on her emergency contact form at the gym. Growth isn't comfortable, she said afterward, packing tears with the same efficiency she uses for carry-ons. I nodded. I hate the version of myself that is willing to tolerate being misunderstood if someone promises it's for a good cause. January, a snow week that didn't stick, he emailed to move our session up an hour for supervision. We logged in at 5. At 4034, a reminder pinged my phone. Pre-call with AP. I don't use that abbreviation in my calendar. It wasn't mine. What's that? I asked. Lena glanced at her phone. Oh, it's nothing. He sends reminders for everyone. Reminders with my initials inside her calendar. Another sticky note on the mental wall. The following week, we had a blow up about nothing that wasn't really about nothing. Her phone buzzing at midnight, my brain flipping a breaker because midnights used to be hours. I brought it to session, raw and clumsy. He asked what the feeling was under the anger. I said, afraid. He said, thank you. He asked Lena what it was like to live with my fear. She said, heavy, and looked off screen at something else. He smiled at that horizon like it was a microphone. After session, he sent reflections. It read like a poem about Lena's resilience. The last paragraph said, from a trauma-informed lens, Ethan's strategies may mirror hypervigilance. We will continue to support Lena's sense of safety first. Not wrong. But safety had become a one-way street. There was no paragraph about my experience that wasn't a prelude to more homework. If you want to understand the next part, you need to know two things. One, because I pay Zoom Pro for my own consulting projects, I know where the buttons live. And two, because I'm the household IT, all our receipts route through me. That Thursday, I opened the Zoom Cloud recording link before Lena got home, not to snoop, but because I wanted to watch my face. The email had an attachment I hadn't noticed before, meetingdetails.csv, a participant report. I clicked it. Rows and columns, join time, leave time, display name, email, IP address. There it was. A pre-session meeting at 5003 that I hadn't attended. Participants, Lena M. and Aaron Pierce. Join times 5031 and 5032. Same external IP, 73.9142.18. Our ISP ends in 2144. Theirs was a Spectrum block across town. At 5048, both left. At 6000, a new meeting ID opened for the couple's session. Lena's IP changed to our home IP. Aaron's changed to his office IP. I sat with the ache of that line of numbers for a long minute. Maybe they tested tech. Maybe he checks in with one partner and then the other. My skin knew what my brain wouldn't admit. It wasn't neutral. It wasn't 5 minutes. It was a ritual. The older logs were there too if I scrolled back. Week 3, pre-call, same dual join, same IP match, then the real session. Week 4, same. Week 5, same. A pattern is a story that doesn't require adjectives. I screenshotted the CSV and the graph that plotted IPs over time because I am the kind of man who takes pictures of numbers when feelings are disrespectful. Then I clicked the recording. At the very start, before the, okay, I'm gonna hit record, there was half a breath of audio, a voice, his saying, we'll keep the dorm talk out of it. Then the beep, then the session, a glitch, but like a seam in wallpaper, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Dorm. I clicked his bio again. Schools listed, training, blah blah, LinkedIn, alma mater Carolina, so is Lena's. A scroll to the bottom showed, Student Counseling Center intern, 2012-2013, her junior year, his practicum. His photo album had one shot from a reunion hymn under an arch, a comment from a mutual friend whose name I recognized from Lena's stories. Nolan, you haven't changed, it read. Aaron Nolan Pierce. Nolan. Lynn. The nicknames lined up like magnets. I opened Lena's college Facebook album from a lifetime ago and scrolled. There he was in the background of a tailgate, arm draped over her shoulder like he owned both of them. Caption, Lynn plus Nolan trouble. My stomach cinched. I didn't know whether to throw up or file a complaint. Conflict of interest is a boring phrase. It has teeth if you've ever had to read policy. A therapist who dated a client in college shouldn't be seeing her now, couples or otherwise. Dual relationships are ethics 101. At minimum, it demands disclosure and consent and supervision. He disclosed nothing. We had consented to being recorded. We had not consented to a narrative where I was a case study and he was directing a redemption arc for his ex. I tried to talk to Lena that night like a person who thinks conversation can fix a splinter. Did you and Aaron ever know each other? I asked, choosing a soft verb and hating myself for it. Her face did a quick shudder thing I recognized from a dozen fights and 100 brand meetings. Her pupils widened, then narrowed. We had a class, she said. He TA'd. Why? You seemed close, I said. He called you Len. He referenced storms, and I found the attendee report. You did pre-calls, together, before our sessions. She glanced at the ceiling like it might offer a teleprompter. He does 5-minute nervous system check-ins with each partner, she said. It's standard, and he calls everyone by what feels safe. Does safe include Friday afternoons on alumni email? I asked, because I had glanced at an email header from him earlier that day and seen apiercarolinalumni.org in a forwarded thread where she'd sent him context for tonight's topic. That was a resource, she said. You're spiraling. This is therapy. He's a professional. He's your ex, I said, and let the words sit there like a car that died in the intersection. She shook her head, but not like someone telling the truth. We dated for a minute, she said finally, rebellious and small. Sophomore year. It was nothing. He was in training. We kissed at a party. He helped me through a panic attack once. It doesn't matter. He didn't take advantage. He's not that guy. It matters because you didn't say it, I said. It matters because I signed consent for recordings in front of a man who has a history with you and an interest in you being the star of every sentence. It matters because the logs show you two were in meetings without me. It matters because his journals read like a case he's building with you as Exhibit A and me as the cautionary tale. Their notes, she said, defensive turning to offense. We need documentation. What would you prefer? That we rely on feelings? You hate feelings. I hate prop work, I said. I hate being edited. I hate learning from a spreadsheet that what I thought was assistance is actually an alliance. She crossed her arms. So what? You're going to open a ticket with my therapist? You going to file a bug report with my heart? I'm going to file a complaint with the licensing board, I said, calm and unfamiliar. And I'm going to ask for our recordings to be reviewed by an actual supervisor who doesn't share a dorm memory with you. And I'm going to stop being your alibi for a process that's pretending to be neutral while writing me into the villain column. You're overreacting, she said. You always do this with systems. You think if you can name the IP, you can name the sin. I'm the guy who puts the dates on the boxes so we don't lose the food, I said. I think names matter. Dated client, dual relationship, undisclosed, pre-session collusion, bias notes. Those are names. That's not spiraling. That's policy. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door like a period. I stood in the kitchen and felt the gravity of a thing I couldn't unknow pull my ribs toward each other. The next day, I did the least cinematic thing possible. I made a folder. Couples therapy. Evidence. I saved every session summary, every cloud recording, every Zoom participant report. I took screenshots of the bio pages and the alumni comment and the yearbook tailgate. I exported email headers from 2 threads she'd forwarded me where context looked suspiciously like coaching. I printed the ethics section from the state LMFT board. Avoid dual relationships that could reasonably impair professional judgment or increase the risk of exploitation. I highlighted like a sophomore who wanted to pass. I called the board and asked how complaints worked. A woman with the voice of a receptionist and the patience of a saint told me I'd need to fill out a form, attach documentation, and include a notarized statement. We take dual relationship concerns seriously, she said. We don't adjudicate divorces, we look at practice. I don't need you to adjudicate my marriage, I said. I need you to look at a man who pressed record on a relationship he used to be in. Then send us everything, she said. Dates help, logs help, he'll have a chance to respond. We'll likely ask for his clinical notes and any supervision records. His notes are interesting, I said, thinking of the way every intervention painted Lena with bravery and me with caution tape. I'm guessing his journals will read like a script. That happens, she said, not unkindly. We also talk to supervisors. After that, I wrote Aaron a letter that my therapist, if I had one, would have told me to rewrite in 3 drafts. I kept it tidy. Effective immediately, we are discontinuing services. I am formally requesting copies of our full unedited recordings, a copy of your policies related to dual relationships and informed consent, and a complete copy of our file, including session notes and supervision notes. Please consider this a formal request under state law. I CC'd Lena. I CC'd the generic licensing email I'd been offered. I did not CC my anger, which sat quietly in the back of the room and watched me choose nouns. He replied in 28 minutes. I'm sorry you feel this way. The sentence every customer service agent knows not to write. He said pre-session check-ins were evidence-based, that he had no conflict of interest, that his relationship with Lena in college was collegial and brief, that he always acts in the client's best interest. He attached a PDF of our signed consent form, which was a bold move because the consent form did not say, I dated your wife. I stared at the screen and read it twice. Then I moved his email into the folder where it could be turned into a piece of paper with a staple. That night, Lena asked me if this was what I wanted, not a marriage counseling question. A who are you becoming question. I told her the answer I'd earned. I want rooms I can trust. I want help that doesn't pretend the helper is God. I want us, if there's an us, to have a referee who wasn't on your team in 2012. She rolled over and faced the wall. I slept on the edge of the bed like a man trying not to fall into a hole he'd finally found the edges of. In the morning, I printed the complaint packet. I numbered pages. I added a table of contents because chaos hates an index. I put the stack on the table by the door with my keys. On my way out, I paused and looked at the house, the plant she keeps alive by talking to it, the mug I keep using because it feels like my hand decided it 20 years ago, the photo strip of us at a fair where we look like people who haven't learned each other's worst tricks yet. I locked the door behind me and drove to a notary because some kinds of truth require stamps. I didn't feel heroic. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt like a man taking a server offline because the logs say it's been compromised and the users keep insisting the error message is a vibe. I slid the folder across the counter to a woman who didn't know she was holding the first half of the story of my marriage. She stamped, initialed, and handed it back. Good luck, she said, like people say when you're walking toward a test you didn't mean to sign up for. On my calendar, I wrote board packet mailed, where session 10 used to be. At 6, when we would have been logging into Zoom to inhabit the roles he liked for us, I took Daisy to the park instead and listened to the sound of other people's conversations in the cold air. Somewhere across town, a man with kind eyes and a bracelet might have been typing a defense. Somewhere in our house, a woman who once kissed me under a broken heater might have been writing in a journal about how it's scary when the pursuer stops chasing and starts documenting. Tomorrow, I'd call an attorney, not to make a scene, but to learn what to do with an edited recording and a paper trail that smells like narrative work in the wrong hands. Tonight, I'd go home, cook something simple, and sit with the fact that the room where truth is supposed to get a fair trial needs a new judge. The board moved like glaciers and subpoenas, which is to say, slow at first, then with a weight that doesn't ask for permission. An investigator named Ms. Corcoran called me 2 weeks after I mailed the packet. Her voice had the kindness of someone who knows she's about to ask you to relive something you didn't plan to rehearse. She confirmed receipt, asked if I'd be willing to sign releases so they could request Zoom Cloud archives directly, and told me their process, preliminary review, probable cause panel, then either dismissal, consent agreement, or formal hearing. She said words like dual relationship inquiry and boundary impairment. She did not say we've seen worse. I appreciated the restraint. I kept living because the rent doesn't discount itself for ethics. I went to work and rebooted a radiology server at 3 a.m. with a surgeon breathing behind me like a metronome. I replaced a power supply. I brought donuts on Fridays like a man who is trying to remind everyone, including himself, that he is good for something. At home, Lena and I slipped into what couples do when the scaffolding shows, routines that don't require honesty, dishes, dog walks, shared logistics. We didn't say therapy, we didn't say Aaron, we tried to talk about movies. We lasted 5 minutes before silence became the only decent move. Her friends split in the neat, predictable ways friends do. Two texted me privately to say they loved me and that Lena was doing work and that I was so structured and it was hard to be near my certainty. I didn't answer. One sent a meal kit with a note that said food is nonpartisan. I cooked it. The broccoli tasted like a truce. The board's first real ask came by certified mail. A request for our entire file from Aaron notes, recordings, consent forms, billing records, supervision logs, any email or message exchanges with either of us. They copied me on the letter out of courtesy and law. There is a particular joy in watching bureaucracy lean toward your side. 3 days later, he emailed me a zip file with a brittle apology. Per board request, here are copies of your recordings and notes. The folder structure told a story its author didn't mean to. Session 01, Session 02, then a hidden folder called Pre-Check-Ins, then another called Edits for Supervision. Inside each, chopped clips labeled with my initials for the parts where I spoke and somatic check, LM for Lena's. The edit file names included timestamps that didn't match the lengths of our posted recordings. In Session 05's Edits for Supervision, there was a file named Dorm Talk Cut MP4. I didn't need more proof. I sent the whole thing to Ms. Corcoran with a cover note that managed not to gloat. She acknowledged receipt and asked if I'd be willing to sit for an interview. I said yes. I would have learned stenography if it sped things up. The interview happened in a conference room with carpet that looked like it had never forgiven a spill. She asked clean questions. I answered like I was under oath because, spiritually, I was. We listened to the tiny pre-record fragments together, the parts where his voice slipped before the beep. We'll keep the dorm talk out of it. We'll anchor safety for Len first. We can build the case for coercive. I watched her face not move. Experienced investigators don't give you their reactions. But she underlined 3 phrases in her notes and asked me to spell coercive just to make sure they had it right in the transcript. A week later, Lena got her letter. I know because I took it from the box and handed it to her on the porch like a bomb. Request for records voluntarily, or the board would subpoena her emails with Aaron related to treatment. She blamed me with her eyes and walked inside like a person carrying a glass city. That night, she opened her laptop, and I watched her fingers hover above the keys, then settle, then type like a person who finally understands what collaboration with a liar asks of you. She turned over everything. I know because the board later showed me in Discovery, and also because I saw the Google folder icons on her desktop turn gray when she moved them to a USB. There were emails with subject lines like tonight's arc and frame suggestion, Ethan's vigilance as protective but overwhelming. There were drafts of journaling prompts that read like monologues for someone auditioning to be a sympathetic witness. There was a Google Doc titled Sessions Narrative Spine, last edited by both of them 30 minutes before our week 3 recording. I didn't throw up. I did sit on the kitchen floor with Daisy's head on my knee and count backward from 100 until my throat stopped trying to climb out of my body. Our last fight before lawyers turned fights into filings was an honest one. No screaming, just two people putting nouns on the table and seeing which ones we couldn't keep. Did you want him to pick you? I asked, on camera, in front of me. I wanted someone to understand that my fear wasn't a flaw, she said. I didn't think through what it meant to make you a prop for that understanding. Do you love me? I asked, because cowardice pretends it's too complicated to ask that. She looked at me for a long time. Then, I love the version of you who doesn't need to be right, she said, and you love the version of me who doesn't need to be believed. We both nodded like we'd solved something. We hadn't. We'd named the thing we could no longer pretend was small. I hired an attorney not because I was trying to win, but because I was tired of being the only adult in rooms with professionals. May was sharp and gentle in equal measure, the kind of lawyer who can read a docket and a person and not confuse them. She turned my folder into a timeline that a judge could read without needing an anecdote. When Lena filed for legal separation, her petition framed by phrases that smelled like Aaron's notes, coercive tendencies, controlling financial structures. May filed our response with the board's notice attached and a motion in limine to exclude any clinician notes or recordings from Aaron pending the outcome of the ethics investigation. In pre-trial conference, the judge read the motion, then looked over his glasses at Lena's attorney and said, "Counsel, I see an active licensing inquiry into your proffered expert's conduct and potential bias. I'm not inclined to admit those records as reliable pending resolution. It wasn't a movie line. It felt like breath." The board hearing came first. They did it over Zoom, irony swallowing its own tail. A panel of three, a senior clinician with a haircut from the 90s, a community member who taught 8th grade for 30 years and had the eyes of a person who's seen everything twice, and an attorney who said little and wrote much. Aaron showed up in a suit jacket and a bracelet, unreadable as a stock photo. His counsel opened with language about brief collegiate acquaintance, no ongoing dual relationship, therapeutic benefit of pre-session regulation, and editorial trimming for clarity and supervision. Ms. Corcoran pressed play on 5 minutes of his own voice collected from those pre-beeps in the edits for supervision folder. He closed his eyes once, a long blink like a man seeing a low wave about to slap the side of a small boat. They asked him about supervision. He produced a letter from a supervisor praising his attunement. The supervisor, under board questions, admitted he had not watched unedited sessions, had not known about pre-calls, and assumed no prior relationship existed. The panel attorney asked, "Did you disclose to the couple that you had dated one partner?" Aaron said, "We were 19. The teacher on the panel said, "That's a yes or no." He said, "No." Then came the notes. The panel asked why every reflection paragraph framed me as hypervigilant and Lena as resilient. He said, "Trauma-informed lens." The senior clinician said, "Trauma-informed does not mean spouse ignorant. It should have been funny. No one laughed." They questioned the recordings. Why the jump cuts? Why the missing seconds where conflict warmed? He said, "Privacy." They asked whose. He had no good answer that wasn't Len's. When they asked about the IP logs, his lawyer tried to argue that technical metadata is not evidence of impropriety. The panel attorney said, "It is evidence of contact when one party thought there was none." The teacher said, "It is evidence of a stacked deck." They recessed for 20 minutes in a breakout room. When they returned, the chair read a finding: probable ethics violations regarding dual relationships, failure to obtain informed consent about that relationship, inadequate boundaries, and prejudicial documentation practices. Interim order: immediate suspension pending completion of remedial ethics training, 6 months of external supervision with a board-approved supervisor, prohibition on recording couple sessions without both parties in the waiting room for the entire duration of the recording, written notification to all current clients about the board action. He could reapply for full license after proof of compliance. They also referred the matter to his licensure in a neighboring state where he saw telehealth clients. I didn't fist pump. I did put my forehead on the desk for a second and let a sound out that wasn't joy and wasn't grief. Relief does what it wants. Lena read the order on her phone at our kitchen counter and sank into a chair like her bones had permission. "I didn't think it would be like this," she said, the sentence trailing off into a place I couldn't follow. "You thought the room was yours," I said. "Rooms with doors belong to the rules." She looked up like she might throw the phone, then set it down with care. "What happens to us?" she asked, finally, direct. "We stop pretending the story needs a soundtrack," I said. "We divide kindly. We keep the dog on the schedule she understands. We let the judge do math. We stop asking therapy to be theater." In the divorce hearing, her attorney tried once more to introduce Aaron's reflections as corroborating evidence of my alleged control. May slid the board order across and said, "Your Honor, these are neither business records nor reliable expert documents. They are editorialized narratives from a sanctioned provider." The judge didn't look over his glasses this time. He just said, "Excluded," and made a note. We agreed to no alimony either direction. Our incomes weren't lopsided enough to make that fight worth the blood. We split the savings and the furniture without turning it into a hostage situation. She kept the dining table she'd found on Facebook Marketplace and convinced herself was Danish. I kept the bed because I paid for the mattress and my back already knew it. We negotiated the lease cleanly. Daisy spent weekdays with me and weekends with her because dogs measure time in meals and naps in the sound of the leash, not in court orders. As part of the decree, at May's quiet insistence, we inserted a clause that therapy materials from any provider who treated either of us in the 6 months prior to separation would not be used by either party in future disputes without both parties' written consent. It read like a boring sentence in a boring document. It felt like a fence on a cliff. Karma took its time with the peripheral players. The boutique agency where Lena worked had already put her on leave for the fallout from the Nashville registry fiasco of a different story. Here, HR read the board order and quietly adjusted her client list to avoid any brands with therapy in their name. Aaron's name disappeared from 2 online directories and from the supervision roster on his alma mater's site. One of those directories, the one with the leaves and a glass aesthetic, posted a bland update: "We believe in ethics. We have removed profiles pending board review." It's amazing how gentle words can carry weight when they have a link to a PDF at the bottom. Friends recalibrated. The ones who'd loved hearing Ethan is so structured as a synonym for Ethan is the problem went quiet. 2 reached out months later with the shame of people who realized they climbed on the wrong wagon. I didn't ask them to grovel. I told them Daisy was still bad at fetch and good at feelings. It was enough. The day the decree came through, I took the blue folder that had carried other disaster and added this case number to the front like a stamp collection I never wanted. I scanned it all, then took the paper to a shredder. There was something reverent about feeding the machine pages that had tried to define me and listening to it turn them into confetti. Lena moved out on a Saturday, and we did that quiet ballet couples do at the end boxes, labels, the ceremonial discovery of a sweater you'd both forgotten you share. She hugged Daisy too long. I let her. She hugged me for the right amount of time. I held my hands against her back like a man saying goodbye to a house that used to be his. After she left, I stood in the middle of the living room and said out loud to the empty, "You did the boring thing. It sounds like nothing. It felt like a medal." I started going to a different therapist, mine, in person. A woman in her 50s who wears cardigans and doesn't post quotes on the internet. In the first session, she said, "We can do 2 things in here: teach your nervous system to trust you and decide what to do with your talent for collecting receipts." I laughed harder than I've laughed in a year. We worked on how not to turn intimacy into litigation. We practiced telling the truth without cross-examining the feelings first. It's humbling. It's not theater. I still think about Aaron sometimes, not in a late-night doom way, but in the way you check the locks before bed. A caution, a reminder that authority and affection are a dangerous mix when you are not vigilant about your own appetite for both. I think about the rooms we went into and how quickly they turned into sets. I think about how she wanted to be believed so badly that she hired a past to stage the present. I think about the older woman on the panel, the teacher saying, "It is evidence of a stacked deck," in a voice that could quiet a cafeteria. I kept the mug that fits my hand. I replaced the folding table that used to wobble when we pretended we were fine with a sturdier one that makes coffee taste like an adult made it. I leave the window cracked when it rains because I like the reminder that the world is bigger than any room I pay for. Daisy sleeps with her head on my shoe some afternoons while I type and forget she's there, and then I shift and she snorts and I say sorry, and it feels like a prayer. If you're stuck in a version of my story, if your partner wants therapy and your gut wants to ask 3 unromantic questions, ask them. Do we know this person? How do they know us? Where do our words go when the session ends? You are not disloyal for demanding that the room where truth goes to work is a room with clean hands. You're not paranoid for checking a meeting log. You're not controlling for asking for consent that looks like consent and not performance. Would you have done what I did? Opened the logs and filed the packet, or sat on the couch and hoped his adjectives could turn you into a man your wife wanted to keep? Would you have confronted her first, or the board? Would you have tried a different therapist or called a lawyer before anyone had a chance to rewrite your face in their notes? Tell me what you would have done. Keep it real. If this story landed for you, hit like so. It finds the next person who thinks therapy is always holy by default. Subscribe if you want more long, messy, painfully human stories where the twist isn't a dramatic confession. It's a CSV, a consent form, a panel that still believes in ethics, and a man who learned that love needs boundaries, and so do the people you pay to teach you how to love.